Welcome back, Tron podcast listeners. This is your host, Rashad Woods. It's an honor and a pleasure to have a very special guest that carved out some time for me on the show today, Mr. Albert Bramante. Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Rashad, for having me on. I'm really happy to be here.
You know, it's crazy what you've done, and you own your own talent agency. You're a full-time professor. You write books. You also show people how to utilize AI. First of all, how does your story start, and how did you manage to juggle all these endeavors?
Well, I started off just as a child, the youngest of five, growing up in a family where I was different. That I was more of a thinker type. I grew up in a family of athletes, which clearly I'm not, and had no interest in athletes, but I loved reading. I loved being around books. So I think it all started with me just being an avid reader and being a bookworm. So I started reading all the books about the brain and human behavior when I was in high school, and I
Right.
became so intrigued by psychology that I decided I was going to major in it. But I
Right.
also had very interest in the creative arts too. So I was in a drama club in high school. I was part of different organizations, and even in college where we did some theater and some
Yeah.
community theater. And I
Yes.
really enjoyed that. I didn't necessarily want to be an actor, but I enjoyed being around actors, even in college. And I
Correct.
realized I want to do something with actors.
Mm-hmm.
So I was kind of doing that and working. I just got hired as a college professor. So as I started finding my way around working with actors, why don't I start a bit? Always wanted to be an entrepreneur. Let me
Right.
start one and let me manage and represent actors. And so that's how that started. 2004 was my first, I founded my first company. And I've been kind of doing that ever since. While I was starting my agency and building that up, I was noticing a lot of actors were self-sabotaging and
Right.
being their own worst enemy and shooting themselves in the foot. It started then that I was going to, look at that. And while I was going for a Ph.D. in psychology, you have to do a
Yeah.
monumental process of dissertation. So I said, I'm going to do my dissertation on self-defeating behavior and performing art.
Unbelievable. Wonderful work. And I don't mean to interrupt, but sometimes people see performances on stage but don't realize how psychologically, impacted they are just to get into that field and how hard it is to take rejection. I saw one of your clips where you're going to get a lot more no's than yeses, right? As far as when
Absolutely.
you get with a competitive field like that. And I'm sure that, you helping people get through those barriers and that self-doubt, obviously being up close to it, had to be, a big motivating factor because your big theme is connecting people.
Yeah, I mean that's the biggest thing is again the amount of no's and just there. It's not like a 9 to 5 job where it's like, okay, I'm gonna go to school, get a degree, get a job, and stay in this job for X number of years that maybe our parents and grandparents have in that generation were able to do.
Right.
Times have changed, and also the industry is what we call gig to gig. So you're really only as good as your last job. And so now that you worked a job, you booked that film, you booked the stage show. Now it's time you have to prove yourself again.
Right.
All over again.
For sure.
And that can be taxing after a while, especially, on the psyche, but hearing no after no after no. I mean, that's the reality of business. And some actors have a really hard time with it.
For sure. I mean, it's not like you can quote, just the competitive nature of it all. And so you help people psychologically as well, too. You've written some books and you've also, what have you noticed has been the theme that you've helped people overcome self-doubt? And you also mentioned about the imposter syndrome, which I've heard before, but for the explanation of this episode, what is the imposter syndrome?
So the imposter syndrome is really when you start doubting yourself. It really start like, am I doing the right thing? Do I really belong here? People are going to find out I'm really not a working actor or I'm really not a working professional.
Right.
And then you start doubting yourself, or you're at a job and you start to think, well, they're going to find out I'm not qualified.
For sure. And so it definitely, and then people start comparing themselves to others who have made it, or, maybe they've come in with peers who have gotten that breakthrough role, that breakthrough situation, and now they have seeds of doubt in their head. I can say just with this podcast, the hardest thing was actually starting this, right? Because, I get concerned of, am I going to have compelling content? You start comparing the successful ones, even though you've just started, and you have to get that. Like, what are you doing? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
And then you become in paralysis mode where it's like, okay, I'm just not going to do it.
Yes.
Because do I start the right thing? Am I going to start the episode the right way? And
Right.
so you go into a perfectionist loop, and
Yep.
then you procrastinate more and more. So
Yep.
perfection and procrastination are two major sides of the same coin that are
Right.
related to self-sabotage.
Right. And I always found it funny because, when you're a child, you're curious and you don't care about necessarily being embarrassed, you trip and fall. But as you get older as an adult, you become more self-conscious, right? And you're like, no, what are people going to think? Is this going to be bad? Am I going to be a bad host? Am I going to be a bad actor? Whereas, up until a certain age as a kid, their curiosity takes over and they don't care about those things, right? And so they have kind of their curiosity is so at the forefront of who they are that they're not even knowing they're doing mistakes. They don't even know if they're doing something silly. They're just caught up in the moment. And we
Mm-hmm.
lose that as we get older and we get more self-conscious. And then we get in our own heads. So it's a crazy thing, and I've done a number of podcasts and I always try to, in my mind,
Mm-hmm.
similar to a working actor, I have to prove myself on every episode that I'm worthy of the guest that's on this show, right? I can't say I did really decent episodes last week, a month ago. That means nothing when I'm on here with you. It doesn't.
Mm-hmm. And not only that, especially if you have a first-time audience member listening to the show for that first episode, you have
Yes.
to kind of assume that
Right.
every episode is a new podcast because
Correct.
you'll have loyal listeners, and then you're going to have listeners that are going to come in and out
Right.
depending on that. And it is challenging. It's not as easy as people think, and that's where,
Yeah.
because a lot of people tell me, oh, I think I can act. I'm like, well, that's great, but can you really do that?
Right. No question.
Are you really set out to do all that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you also help people find their long-term purpose. And so I read an article about you where it said your bold journey article. It says you also have 20 years as a college professor, which we talked about it. And then you have books, The Martyr Complex, as well as Gaslighting in Business and Work. So can you talk about those, please?
Sure. Well, like I said, I started teaching in 2003, actually. So, and actually, there's a story with that attached. I was thrown into, like if you want to use the metaphor, a deep end of the pool, because as college professors, it's different than primary school education. Because when you go to primary school education, you get a 4-year degree, you get formal training in education. As a college professor, all you need really is a master's degree in your discipline. There's no teaching training. And so I applied a while back, even before that, there was a community college about 10 minutes from my house. I
Yeah.
said, let me put in my application. This was 2 years even before this. And I remember getting a call. It was the day after Labor Day. And it was like, hi, I'm I'm secretary from the psych department. We have a situation come in. We had a professor who backed out. Can you come and meet with us? So I
Mm-hmm.
met with them, and they're like, okay, well, for 2 minutes, they asked me what my availability was. I said I'm
Oh, wow.
available. They handed me the class list. They handed me
Mm-hmm.
the textbook, and I said, you're hired. And not only that, you start tomorrow.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's
Now I had
amazing.
zero experience. Okay, I pulled an all-nighter. I was like, I'm gonna put a syllabus together,
Yeah.
and don't know foggiest idea what I'm about to do.
Time to fly by the seat of my pants, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, I'm fine. And coming back with my limited knowledge at the time of show business,
Yeah.
fake it till you make it. So get up there
For sure.
and
For sure.
pretend like you know what you're doing.
That's awesome.
And that's what I did. I walked in there. I didn't tell anybody, any students in any of my classes that semester, that this is my first time. I
Right.
went in like I was teaching before. I handed out my syllabus. I went in and I completed the first semester. And I had a lot of students going to me saying that was great.
Oh, that's
How many
amazing.
years have you been teaching? I'm like, I was kind of more inclined to be open at the end, but like,
Yeah.
yeah, none. This is
Yeah.
you guys were the guinea pig.
Yeah.
Now, of course, I'm not going to say confidence the
First day.
first time,
Right.
because then it would. I mean, you wouldn't go to surgery and the surgeon come up to you like, "Wish me luck. This is my first time." So no, nobody wants to be that first time, but everybody starts up somewhere. Everybody has to have that first class.
Right.
So I think that was like my first major confidence boost. That if hey, I can do this.
That's awesome. That's a fact. And to your point, sometimes you need to just be thrown into the deep end of things to find out if you can handle the profession that you ultimately go into, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes things don't call you when you're ready. I mean, they have understudies and actors, right? And so anything can happen, right? In a or backup quarterback in sports, so to speak, right? So you better be ready if something
You better
happens.
be called.
You better be on call. That's an awesome experience, and that's a learning lesson. That I see what you profess over the clips that you give. Building that, you had the confidence to be ready to say, okay, hey, I got to figure this out, and as long as I'm quote unquote fake it till I make it, and more importantly, don't show it in my body language that I'm not ready for this moment.
Absolutely.
80%.
Because your audience may never know. And that's why, like, I even tell actors, like, even when you're on stage and let's say you flub a line or you miss a mark, don't draw attention or just keep
Correct.
going.
Correct.
And
Correct.
I'll tell you, there was plenty of times where when I was even teaching the first semester, I stumbled.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't draw attention to it. I just kept going.
Yes.
And maybe they'll notice, maybe they won't. But the point is that if you keep going, they'll be even more forgiving if they do notice
Right.
that
Right.
you flubbed. And I've been doing it now 22 years later. I'm still, the rest of obviously I must be doing something right.
For sure.
So,
For sure.
but it's also leaning into your instincts. Part of it, I also kind of went into like, okay, when I was at that time, had my master's. So I was in college for 6 years, if you think about it, 4 years.
Yeah.
I then started channeling, okay, what teachers did I like? What resonated with me? What teachers I didn't like? So let me use the behaviors of the student, let me model the teachers I like. So, yes, I was blind, but I wasn't 100% blind. I went in with that, at least with that framework of like, okay, this is what,
But see
these are
that
professors I like.
that
So,
channels back to your curiosity and your reading, because you decided to start doing your homework behind the scenes, and you said, okay, where I'm going to gravitate towards. You didn't just float through the position and just take it day by day. You started doing your homework. You started finding out what was your best tendencies, what was working best for you. And you and I have a very similar background when it comes to how I started the show. Just briefly, is because I watch Discovery Channel. I watch documentaries. I I always use the inspiration of Keanu Reeves. Like Keanu, one of the biggest movie stars in the world, if not the biggest. But then you find out the guy's a geek, right? Like, and that's a good thing. He watches documentaries. You go on Netflix. He's trying to learn about like different places, maybe even extraterrestrials. He has a 10-part Roku series where he visited all these various different places that people built things and made things. And you're like, this dude could just be sitting on a movie set on the laurels of his success, but he's curious. And so I used to read encyclopedias as a kid. See, now it's cool to be a nerd, right? Like in 2025. Growing up, it wasn't easy being a geek who really liked to read about fascinating things and no random, acts that people would just be like, dude, what the heck are you talking about? So that's kind of
right.
how this that's kind of how this show morphed and developed, right?
And you just take one step at a time, and that's how it will. You build layers upon each thing, and that's the way to do it.
Yep.
Way to start. And sometimes it's best to just rip the band-aid off and just start.
Exactly.
Because you
Exactly.
could always, even go back to the show. You could always record a couple episodes and maybe not even use those episodes in the beginning.
Right.
But at least you've done it and you're familiar with the format of it.
Absolutely. Right.
Because the thing about and with any type of skill, you can read about it, you can watch instructional videos, but until you do it,
Right.
it becomes a whole other thing. Because I'm not, right now I'm not hosting a podcast, but I've been a guest on podcasts, and
Right.
I've even watched some of the shows where it was like the first time guest till now, I'm like, there's a difference.
Correct. Pace.
And there'll be a difference in a year from now because you just get more to the muscle of doing it. And when you become a muscle of doing it, like I know I'm a much different professor than I was 22 years ago.
And that
It's just evolved.
And you should, right? You should be better at something that you've done over a course of time than you'd start when you first
Yeah.
started, right? And so one question I really want to know is, how does your as a CEO of a talent agency, you juggle multiple things. How do you manage talent? How does that process go? And who is your clientele primary base?
Well, primary base are working actors in the New York City area. They're to think about, first of all, the first step was working with actors understanding they're people too. They're not just they're much more than their characters they play. And so understanding that, and most of the time actors are very sensitive and empathic people. I mean, that's what helps them get into character. Is really having empathy and understanding a character. So I think when you can play to that level, it helps develop much rapport with actors.
And because you've been around them for so long, you knew exactly where their mental state was and how to approach that and how to manage that. And like I said, I went to your website and I was like, wow, this is really, really, first of all, it's very splashy, attractive. The colors are really, really well utilized and everything like that. So it's a very impressive website. So I'm certainly glad that your talent, that you've acquired and continue to manage, have somebody who's very empathetic to what they're going on upstairs and not just, hey, book the next gig, because I
Hmm.
can only, it's a very lonely road, I can imagine, and they probably have family and other people who are saying you really should just get a job, so to speak, and
Yeah.
not do this, right? So how do you combine artificial intelligence in all these things?
So I started recently, say maybe, obviously when the AI boom about 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, I started hearing, I was like, what is this ChatGPT thing? And at first I was like, I don't know. I'm just not. Once at first, even when I started playing around with it, I was like, I don't know,
Right.
because it was giving you very generic responses. It was great for at that time as an information tool, but it wasn't.
Of course.
It wasn't until I learned how to prompt it well and how to really conversate with it that I realized that this can be a tool. Now,
Yes.
it's not a replacement. Now I come from a viewpoint where I don't think AI is going to replace us anytime soon.
Correct. Correct.
I mean, at least not my lifetime, I don't think. What
Right.
I do feel, though, is it can be a great aid. It can be a great tool to
Absolutely.
use, like a second or even third brain, a way to look like, okay, well, this could be a great partner or brainstorming tool. So the one thing I kind of use it again is social media,
Yes.
content creation, and I
Automate
don't
processes.
automating processes. And what I would say to anybody who's doing that for that reason is to look at it like a non-perfect. It's not perfect, so I
Yes.
would never tell anyone just to take the first thing that it gives you
Oh
and
no,
go with it completely.
not at
You
all.
have to make it your own. So usually, what I'll do is I'll come up with an idea for something or a skeleton, and I'll put it in my own words, and then
Right.
I'll
Right.
run it through ChatGPT or Claude or any other large language model, and then I will be able to find a great and then I'll come back and then I'll add more to it. Okay, how does this work in my voice?
I have to
Because
ask. Just go ahead.
because very often when you put things in somebody else when in an AI voice, especially if we're used to where people will know the difference between your voice and
What's funny you mentioned that, and I apologize for cutting you off earlier because I have to ask, as a professor in particular, if there's some sort of paper or anything somebody has to type up and they just chat you. Like, what's the difference between that? Because you see now this is a huge problem right now.
well, I look at the difference between someone's writing in general or communication in general, and if I start to see words that I don't even use,
You can
you
tell.
know, more a lot of flowery language in their papers.
Oh my goodness.
And I'm just like, and it's actually, some professors were getting so I just find it hilarious. I'm like, I know what you did because I use this stuff every day too. I
That's
know,
fantastic.
or and what I will often tell, if any student is listening to this, make sure you read what you post
Right.
before you just cut and paste. Because one time, this hasn't happened to me. One of my colleagues was reading the paper, and then in the middle of it, there was a statement that says, "And as a large language model, I cannot prep." And I'm like, "Wow, that's lazy." I'm like,
Didn't even
at
check to
least
see.
take that sentence out, please.
Bad. Yeah, because it has the
And so
automated portion of there in there.
it's automated. The professor wrote, I think on the paper, "You're getting an F, but I'm going to give ChatGPT an A." But I don't think there's no way to really stop it. Now, one way you could do as professor, if you start to suspect, start asking students, you said this statement, so what
Mhm.
do you mean by that?
Right. Right.
Now, if they
Right.
really wrote it,
They'll know.
because the challenge about with AI, you cannot really prove it, because I could give the same prompt, you could give the same prompt, we're going to get a different outcome.
Right. Right.
So what I would say is start asking questions.
Absolutely.
Well, you
Absolutely.
say this, this is very interesting that you said the statement. What did you mean by that?
Right. Go into detail about this, please. Yeah, for
Yeah, tell
sure.
me more. Tell me more. I'm curious and fascinated by it.
Well, that's when the actor portion has to come out, and you can fake it that you actually.
And if you get great, if you can fake it, that's great. Because I
Ooh.
can't, I wouldn't be able to prove otherwise. But if
Yeah.
you're sitting there stumbling, you said it. So
Yeah.
tell me. What do you mean by that? So again, if you are going to use AI, which I don't recommend as a professor, but if you are going to do it,
Right.
please be familiar with what it is you're doing.
For sure. I mean, I can only imagine. Like, I was in college 20 years ago, and I'm like, if this tool was available, I mean, maybe
Oh
some.
yeah, I'm not. I'm not gonna even lie here. I'm gonna take my student, put my student hat on. I'm like, yeah, I would have made life a lot easier. But
Exactly.
yeah, I would have cost myself a lot. But again,
Yeah, it's
you have to make it your own.
you,
Please, it can cut down the workload, yes,
for
but it
sure.
should never 100% be the replacement of you.
Well, I was talking to an author, who was on here previously, and he said the same thing. He's like, you can clear up a sentence that you typed up to get it clarity, but it has to be your work that you did. If you're trying to, I've talked to songwriters, and it's like, yeah, you can use it to structure the song that you wrote, but you don't want to make it to have an original song that was actually, it's not the same. And then the emotion of who you are ultimately is not going into that particular piece of
No,
work.
and it's going to come off flat. It's going to, and this is what, because a lot of people ask me, well, now people are going to start using AI to write movies. I'm like, that doesn't scare me one bit because I know that if a person is going to write a movie just with ChatGPT, it's going to be the most lamest movie
Oh, I
ever.
can only imagine. I can only
It's going
imagine.
to be very lame. So I'm not worried about that at all because it doesn't know the complexity of things. Can it structure? Yes. Then maybe it can give you some ideas of the pointers to go into.
Right.
Fine. But you still have to write the thing yourself.
Right. Like it's almost like Gary Oldman's character in The Professional. You're never going to chat GTP, that role that he played of Norman Stansfield, right? Where he's like, that's Gary Oldman. Like he has to have dialogue where he's, you know, ultimately an iconic role that he played. You're not going to be able to just say hey, everyone, and that's going to come across really cool, inside of
Yeah.
a chat GTP. So how do you do when it comes to hypnosis too, as well too? I just want to dive briefly into that because I know that's in your background as well too.
Yeah, well, hypnosis is a very natural process. I mean, I know it's for some people, it may be a little bit scary or a little bit mysterious,
Yes.
but it's a natural process that we all go into. And it's just by really being open to ideas and really, it's just bypassing what we call the critical factor, the protective ego part of our brain. It's bypassing that.
Okay.
So now, when people think hypnosis, traditionally they'll think of someone doing a pocket watch and someone, acting funny. Or I would say the if you really want to get an idea of hypnosis, it is definitely not what you saw in the movie Get Out. I can tell you that right now. I can tell you that because I cannot tell you how many times questions I've got asked when that movie came out.
The Sunken Palace,
Yeah, the saucer, stirring the thing.
the
I'm
tears and
like,
everything.
yeah, no, it's when I saw that movie, everyone was scared in the movie theater. I was hysterically laugh.
Oh my gosh.
I thought it was over the top hilarious, the entire thing. And I'm like, probably not the best frame, the typical audience member because again, I didn't find it scary. I just
Yeah.
found it really over the top. I would classify it more as a comedy than I would a horror movie, but that's just me. But I digress. But
Right.
it's more of putting yourself in a more receptive and open state.
Right.
And
Okay.
you don't really have to put someone in a trance or knock them out to hypnotize them. Look at politicians, look at commercials, look at consumers, look at salespeople. How many times you went to go into a store to buy a product and came out with stuff you didn't even know you needed?
Absolutely.
But now you think you're convinced yourself you need it. In a nutshell, it's all about having someone do something, but
Mhm.
then be convinced that it's their own idea.
It's a mixture of
Right.
sales.
That's exactly what good hypnosis is.
Good.
So,
Good.
like, if I was to work with someone, let's say, to stop smoking or to work out or eat better, it wouldn't be like, oh, I'm going to eat better because I was told to. It's because I want to eat better. I want to stop smoking.
For sure.
So
For sure.
that's where true hypnosis comes in. It's like, okay, I want to stop smoking.
Right. So, like for example, for actors to get over that imposter syndrome or that self doubt, it's you start working on the mental aspect of how you are a good actor. You are going to make this
Exactly.
audition.
You already know this. You already know it. You went to school for it. You've
Right.
already had that.
Unquestionably.
So get out of your head. Now, I can't make someone in hypnosis become a better actor because they need the training,
Right.
but I can make them be the best actor they can be at that moment by getting out of their head
Right.
and getting all that chatter out of your head. Because
Absolutely.
you'd be surprised about not just for actors, but for anything. anyone or any profession if you really set yourself out there.
And here's the thing, when you said that, misconceptions about things like, hypnosis, I do martial arts, right? And so it's a lot different. What you practice martial arts is much different than what you see in films. Like not everybody is Jean-Claude Van Damme that's gonna like most of the people who do
Yeah,
martial arts, get out of your head. Not they're people who are 9 to 5, they're regular people. They come in different shapes, sizes, and height and weight. Not everybody it's not a kumite every single day, right?
yeah.
You know what I mean? So
And it's also more about a mental discipline too than it is
absolutely.
physical. Yes, you can do the physical actions and it's great, but it's also
Yes.
the mental component too that really makes you shine
Right.
with martial arts.
And it's cool too when you talked about previously when you said you have to adjust on the fly because if you're doing a technique and you may have done an incorrect technique, you have to adjust it based upon the scenario to make it still be effective.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and you have to be on the fly and be very fast, I would imagine, in that thing, especially
Absolutely.
when there's a self-defense situation.
Oh yeah.
You're gonna have to use a fraction of a second reflex and just do what you need.
Absolutely. Well, and so obviously I could pick your brain all day. And I think that this is one of the more interesting podcasts that I've had. Not often I get a chance to talk to a CEO of a talent agency, a professor, and all the things that you've done. And to try to put all that into a 30-minute interview is sort of an injustice to what you've accomplished. So, how can people find, you don't need me, Albert Bramante, all your accomplishments and what you do? Where can you be found and located?
So you can find me on my website, albertbramante.com. You can also
It's yeah, and believe me, I looked you up, and I was very, very honored that you reached out to me. I always kind of choke up a little bit when somebody sends me an email said they'd watch my show because, like I said, I'm just one person trying to navigate this very crowded space. So I really appreciate your time to be able to be on the. I really appreciate you, Albert Bramante. Thank you very much, professor, CEO, well accomplished businessman, and helper of people, connecting people. Thank you so much.
thank you for having me.
Yep. Bye.